Saltwater crocodile raised in breeding centers and released in the wild don't go back to their captivity according to our new research. So what about African cheetahs?
भाग्य में हो रहा
फिर आएंगे
हाँ जान टाइगर अटल साइड में मेन रोड पे बैठा है बीच में
जाएगा नहीं जाएगा जाएगा नहीं जाएगा
डबल वन सब एडल्ट मेल का वो फुलता है on the fourth road काय कौन करेगा
They were brought from Namibia and South Africa to Kuno National Park of India, Madhya Pradesh. Now few started dispersing naturally to Ranthambore and other areas of Rajasthan. So would Kepitu ever returned on his own? Look, unlike these crocs, all translocated cats possess strong homing instincts, often trying to walk back to where they came from originally. Now, reintroduction projects, that's why use soft release program, that is holding them in enclosure for 2 months at least, specifically to break this bond with their previous home. In April 2026, as you know, Kepitu traveled over 150 kilometers from Kuno to Ranthambore. This was a natural territorial exploration to find his own home range away from his mother Asha and other dominant males. It is highly unlikely Kepitu would have returned to Kuno on his own, even though he was clearly struggling to hunt. Crocodiles seem content to accept their new wild home. Cheetahs like Kepitu are driven by a restless biological urge to find the perfect territory, even if that journey leads them directly into the territories of dangerous apex guild of Ranthambore. While he was born in Kuno, his biological operating system is programmed to avoid the very place he was born once he hits adulthood. This behavior, called natal dispersal, is common in many big cats and serves a very critical evolutionary purpose. Nature has a built-in safety switch to prevent inbreeding. So this is a biological push. Once a young male cheetah like Kepitu reaches maturity around 18 to 24 months, his biology pushes him to leave his natal range where he was born. If he stayed, he would eventually compete for mates with his own mother or sisters. To ensure genetic health, young males are hardwired to wander far away to find unrelated females. If he stayed back in Kuno, he would be constantly bullied or even killed by dominant coalitions. So leaving Kuno was a survival tactic to find a vacancy where he could be the boss without getting into a lethal fight with older, more experienced males. Just that he had no idea the CEO stays there where he decided to venture. This coexistence in close proximity leads to spatio-temporal resource partitioning by the large carnivores, as well as possible aggressive intraspecific interactions, which could influence translocation success and depress populations due to the competition. Also, as the populations in Kuno grows, now up to 57 individuals, the park itself can become crowded for a high energy predator. But KP2 by no means is unique, or it's not that only male cheetahs disperse. His mother, Asha, used to be a wanderer too. In last year, August, I think, a female named Juala moved roughly 130 to 180 kilometer towards Ranthambore. Same thing happened. Tracked by GPS collar, tranquilized, and brought back to Kuno due to her livestock predation and danger of colliding with tigers. She was not seen in the same zone with tiger and leopard by tourists, didn't make it to the headlines, but females also move over large home ranges. Female cheetahs in Africa can naturally maintain enormous ranges, sometimes hundreds or even thousands of square kilometers. A 100-kilometer exploratory movement is dramatic for us to observe here in India, but biologically it is not abnormal for a wide-ranging carnivore. Possible reasons for female cheetahs living include searching for better prey availability, exploring habitat, avoiding dominant individuals, finding quieter areas for cub rearing, natural dispersal behavior in a newly established population, or simply following open landscape corridors. That's what they do. See, free ranging conditions, cheetahs have a distinct spatial ecology from other big cats. Males hold widely spaced territories while females and non-territorial floater males use the intervening areas altogether at very low densities across very large landscapes. That's the pattern these cheetahs are trying to establish. But as expected, they are repeatedly running up against human settlements and livestock. Cheetahs need more than corridors. They require large prey-rich landscapes, whether national parks or other wilderness areas of that scale to begin with. If Kepetu had not been tranquilized, his long-term survival in Ranthambore would have been highly unlikely without constant human intervention. While he proved remarkably capable in the short term in navigating various landscapes, the structural ecological pressures of Ranthambore are fundamentally stacked against an African cheetah. Now, you heard me saying I don't like the fact that he has been tranquilized like this for the third time. It definitely takes a toll on the body, after which there will be a readjustment period, and then there's no assurance he will not try this dispersal again. Also, physically forcing Kepitu back into a territory he clearly wants to leave, we are ignoring the animal's own ecological wisdom. But without proper establishment of interstate wildlife corridor, the situation for African cheetahs here is bleak. As I mentioned before, Ranthambore is ecological mismatch for cheetahs. They require vast open plains for high-speed hunting, which Ranthambore's dense, rocky scrub forest does not provide. Even if he survived physically, he would have remained a lone individual with no chance of breeding, rendering his essential presence an ecologically dead end rather than a conservation success. The rare triple sighting of a tiger, leopard, and cheetah in one zone was a historic moment, but it signaled actually a tragedy about to happen. But who will stop this to happen again unless he is put into confined enclosures in Kuno? Having already mapped the 150-kilometer route to Ranthambore, Kepitu now has the spatial memory of that corridor. Animals often follow their own previous tracks or scent trails. Unless the social dynamics inside Kuno changes, that is, the dominant male leaves, opening up a job vacancy for him, Kepitu's instinct will be to push back towards the same open territories he just discovered. So management knows Kuno is becoming a pressure cooker for young males. This is why the Gandhisagar Wildlife Sanctuary in Madhya Pradesh is being prepared as a second home. So instead of letting Kepe to wander back to the tiger-heavy Ranthambore, the plan B is to eventually move some of these adventurous explorers to Gandhisagar, which has lower predator competition and is specifically being prepared for cheetahs. Eventually, if he refuses to stay in any of this protected area, he may have to live his life in a managed wild state, where he is free to roam, but humans have to constantly intervene every time he crosses a literal or metaphorical red line. Tepetu is doing exactly what a healthy wild cheetah is supposed to do. He is trying to find a new home. We made a disaster. Eventually, there would have been fatal conflict with tiger or leopard, or Kepitu could be surviving on the fringes. Lesser probability between these two possibilities. Many young male predators that can't hold a core territory become floaters or satellites. So Kepitu might have moved to the buffer zones or peripheral scrub forest of Ranthambore. These areas have fewer tigers but enough small prey like chinkara, hares. So the outcome could have been different. He could have survived for months or even years as a ghost, moving constantly to avoid detection by leopards and tigers. However, this lifestyle is extremely stressful and often leads to poor health over time. If Kepitu attempted to steal a kill or blundered into a leopard's thicket, he would likely have been killed or driven out of the area completely. If pushed out of Ranthambore by other predators, Kepitu would have been forced back into human dominated landscapes, eventually thereby experiencing other kind of conflicts, wandering through villages, crossing highways, or encountering feral dog packs. So the outcome could be death by vehicle strike, poisoned by villagers who want to protect their livestock, or captured by authorities eventually in a much more dangerous urban setting. So once a young male disperses 150 km and finds a prey-rich area like Ranthambore, they do not voluntarily want to return to their birth site. Kuno was occupied by other males. Ranthambore was new and full of food. See, the decision to tranquilize was life-saving intervention at this point. While it interrupted his natural dispersal, it prevented an almost certain fatal encounter in a landscape where he was the underdog. The project supporters argue that reintroduction is a process, not an one step event, and that the wild ranging movements of Kepitu are simply the teething pains of a 50-year project. They view the successful birth of cubs like Kepitu as proof that the project is working despite the chaos. I will share my further thoughts. Just because things are changing day to day basis, I thought that I will explain a bit more about this serious crisis. So you can consider this as part 2 and the next one as part 3. Really doesn't matter, these are independent videos. Cheetahs are among the most difficult species to reintroduce, historically having lower survival rates, less than 50% compared to pumas or maned wolves. By that, I am not saying the project will permanently fail. It is unthoughtful because it forces animals into a landscape that is too small and too tiger dense for a natural life. For cheetah, global success usually requires vast contiguous habitats. By tranquilizing Kepitu repeatedly and even Kepitri and bringing them back, we are essentially managing them like a zoo animal in a very large cage rather than letting them exist as a truly wild predators. This is everything against what conservation is all about. Large carnivores often need active conservation interventions, sometimes in the form of translocations to ensure gene flow and viable populations. The overall success rate of translocations for all individuals, irrespective of species, was 66%, varying between 94% in South America and 62% in Africa. So why we shouldn't try? Ironically, this project has revived attention to endangered grassland ecosystems because cheetahs are struggling. But it also shows India imported a species before securing the ecosystem needed to sustain it. Fact is, for publicity and media attention and other politically motivated reasons, which I'm going to discuss in next part, government treated cheetahs like a symbolic species insertion. Big cats generate tourism, branding, state prestige, safari economics, media attention. Cheetahs are globally iconic animals. They attract international coverage and tourists. This is called charismatic megafauna politics. Not conservation, but in our country, success is often defined politically and economically, not ecologically. You know what is happening with Great Nicobar, right? In science, failed experiments produce learning. In politics, failure becomes denial, image management, or data opacity of limiting transparency around. There is already limiting transparency around dates, weights decision, collared injuries, and management problems. Is there any point speaking against government policies to relocate African cheetahs in unsuitable ecosystem of India when new ones are being released from soft enclosures as and when we speak? I sometimes ask myself what I am doing. Not that any decision maker will watch YouTube video and decide, oh, we totally missed that point. Out of the 54 cheetahs in Kuno National Park, 17 are currently free ranging in the wild. The other 37 cheetahs are kept in soft bomas, which are enclosures measuring 50 to 150 hectares that allows the cheetahs to acclimatize with the environment while also being protected from predators. After quarantine, all cheetahs are first released into bomas before being released into the wild. The government is currently working on a long-term plan to create a cheetah landscape across Kuno, Gandhisagar, and Nauradehi national parks. There are also discussions among forest officials to introduce cheetahs in other parts of India, such as the Bandi grassland in Gujarat. They know exactly what they are doing. Two Botswana females were released yesterday, despite the fact that Kuno National Park is already saturated. They are still treating it as a metapopulation project, not a closed reserve with a fixed carrying capacity. Excessive dependence on enclosures and human intervention, repeated recapture of roaming animals. I mean, it is now becoming a kind of a semi-managed display population rather than a genuinely self-sustaining wild population. But most Indian wildlife tourists don't understand or care for conservation. They are vulnerable to premier-driven impressionability. Politically and institutionally, there are also strong incentives to continue releases. The project is internationally visible. India has invested major prestige and money in becoming a cheetah state, as somebody mentioned. Birds are being presented as proof of success, and stopping imports now could be interpreted as admitting strategic failure. One of the principal scientists behind Project Cheetah, Mr. Jhala, clashed with aspects of how the project was being managed after the cheetahs arrived. One flashpoint was his reported objection to transporting cheetahs from Gwalior to Kuno using noisy military Chinook helicopter during the 2022 relocation. Then in 2023, the Environment Ministry cut short his service extension at the Wildlife Institute of India, and he was later left out of the new Cheetah Task Force, despite being one of the pioneer scientists who laid the technical groundwork for this particular project since 2009. Separately, several foreign experts connected to the project later complained that their advice on veterinary and management issues were being ignored after multiple cheetah deaths. When scientists who were directly involved got sidelined for questioning a certain aspect, you can imagine how much our voice matters to the current government. Then I tell myself, if I don't do the only thing I can do, that is to speak up, then also what's the point of education? The water shortages, the heat waves, crop instability, polluted air, rising food prices, petrol, disappearing green spaces that you and I are experiencing, all are correlated. With wildlife issues, especially, people often think it's happening somewhere else. Experts will handle it. One person can't make any change. I already have enough problems of my own, and these are all correct. Now in cities, we all feel disconnected from forests, but they depend on them. rainfall cycles, groundwater recharge, temperature regulations, biodiversity, food systems. If ecosystems become too degraded to support wildlife movement, they eventually become unstable for humans as well. Shouldn't our resources prioritize endangered native species and habitats first? Even if you don't care about cheetah or wildlife, in that case, you will not watch this video, but still, don't you think our tax money should first protect and restore the ecological systems and native fauna biodiversity that directly sustain the country and its people? The release of more cheetahs into India under the National Tiger Conservation Authority and government backed reintroduction program does not end debate about whether the ecological assumptions, animal welfare standards, or long term conservation goals are sound. Public criticism can still influence future releases, habitat management, veterinary protocols, transparency around mortality data, whether the project expands to new sites, and how conservation overall prioritizes how they are funded. If our goal is accountability, better science, transparency, or limiting expansion into unsuitable habitats, public criticism can still matter significantly. If our concern is animal welfare, sustained scrutiny often affects operational decisions even when projects continue. So I urge you to read and speak up too, or at least support those who are doing so. Conservation history is full of programs that were modified years after launch because scientists, activists, journalists, and local communities kept challenging the assumptions. Speaking critically is not automatically futile just because implementation continues to happen and nobody seems to care. Having said that, I know what's going to happen. They will redefine really what counts as success. More cheetahs alive in India than before versus a truly viable, minimally managed wild population adapted to Indian ecosystems. And no price for guessing they will go for the former. Modern economic thinking carries a quiet, pervasive blind spot. It reduces the natural world to inputs. Then forests becomes timber revenue, rivers become irrigation capacity, fish becomes quarterly yields. Beneath it all sits an unspoken premise that nature is merely a supplier and money is the true measure of value.